Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Ari Sachs of Congregation Beth Mordechai coming to another edition of this week's online Parsha class. I'm so happy you could join us as we learn about this week's Torah portion of Parashat Shlach Lecha. And for this portion, we're actually going to focus really on one line within the second third of this week's Torah portion, which is the third that you would read if you go to conservative congregations around the world. And this section talks about the response that Moses gives to God after God says that he's going to destroy the people, because when the Israelites sent spies into the land of Canaan to see what it was like, they came back with bad reports, that the people don't trust him, don't trust God to lead them into the land. And so Moses responds, which we know actually leads to God saying, okay, fine, I'm not going to destroy the people. But there's one line there that I want to focus on after understanding a little bit of the context. So you can now turn in, you can look on the screen at sefaria.org. Verse 13, we're going to go in the English and then move to the Hebrew when we get to our main verse. And Moses said unto the Lord, when the Egyptians shall hear that you brought up this people from because of your might from among them, they will say to the inhabitants of this land who have heard that you are the Lord in the midst of this people, inasmuch as you, the Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands over them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now, if you shall kill this people as one man, then the nations which have heard the fame of thee will speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land which he swore unto them, therefore he has slain them in the wilderness. So it's a classical argument that one would make in saying that you should destroy whatever it is that you're working on, as to say, if you destroy it, it shows that you were not good in the first place. And in addition, not just that you're not able to do what it is that you set out to do, but that people would not feel, that is to say, sorry, that others would feel that you are not able to fulfill your word, and that in this particular case, that your strength is only there to destroy a people. Moses then makes the argument that it is stronger, it is better for God to show God's mercy, because there is a strength in God's mercy as opposed to the strength in destroying a people who are not going to be able to listen to you. And so we turn now back to sefaria.org just to see that in context. Here's a verse that we're going to look at in a moment. Ve'ata yigdalna. And now I pray thee, Koach Adonai, the strength of Adonai, Ka'asher dibarta lemor, that which you have said. Adonai erech apayim v'rav chesed, noseh avon v'fesha v'nakeh lo yenakeh, poker avon avot abanim al shelishim ve'al ribeim. The Lord is slow to anger and plenty in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression, that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generation. That is to say that what Moses is saying here, that God's koach is in being able to be merciful enough so that the people will not be destroyed by the fact of their own sins. God could destroy them because God is strong, but that strength can also be seen in the ability to give mercy. Just as a sidebar on that, one of my favorite shows is Game of Thrones, and there is this one scene in which you have two characters. One who is the leader of this northern kingdom. He came to it by overthrowing the person who was there beforehand. That person was named Theon, and Theon was totally broken down by this leader to the point where he lost his sense of identity, and he felt hurt, he felt pained, and this leader, his sense of power was in being able to destroy the identity of this person. He basically turned him almost into an animal. And then we see later in the show that Theon does something that the leader is upset about, and as opposed to hurting him like he did before, the leader actually showed him mercy. And that sense of mercy you could see in his face was a moment in which he recognized, he said, I could destroy you if I wanted to, but I have even greater power because I choose not to use it to destroy you. And to a certain degree, while that's a negative association, to a certain degree, God is seen in that light. God is a king, as a leader, is an entity in power that could destroy us if God wanted to. But God knows that it's not only that would not, it's not the only way of showing power, but that there's no use for that kind of power if the people are fully gone. That if there's no one to worship you, then what point is there of even being a God? Which is part of what Moses is saying. You take these people out, you're going to make them your people, and then all of a sudden you can't actually make them your people. You can't lead them to the promised land that you have said. Who's going to follow you at all? Show your mercy, show that power that you can hold back also for your own sake, that you have the people who will be able to follow your word. And so that strength, both of mercy and of the ability to say that I need these people to get what I need as God, is I think what is seen in the context of this verse regards to the Koach Adonai, the strength of God to show mercy to God's people. But there is another sense of what this kind of strength looks like that I want to focus on. And this comes from a hasidic commentary known as the Noam Elimelekh. Noam Elimelekh takes this verse, Ve'ata idalna koach, dibarta lemor, that therefore I pray, let my Lord's strength be great, as you have declared, saying. Now, in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, which we use in synagogue, the term strength is actually translated as forbearance, or meaning mercy, so that God's strength is seen as that sense of mercy. But we're going to see how Noam Elimelekh views it here. Nir'eh, it seems, Tehine Adonai yitbarach bara et al olamo lehitiv labruim. That it seems that God, the one who is most blessed, created the world in order to fill it with good things. That God wanted this world to be full of goodness. Does not want the world to be full of evil, of horror. She'al yedei avodatam lo yitbarach yizku lischar gadol. And that when we serve God, we merit that great reward that comes from that act of serving. We get that great reward, which seems to be the goodness of all creation. And so it seems then, just as a side note for a moment, that what God was desiring of the people that they weren't seem to getting because they weren't following God's direction. They wanted to spy the land when God said, this is the way. They weren't saying, God, you're right, we're going to follow you because we believe in you. They weren't going through that act of worship. That what God wanted in that sense of worship is that, according to Lisa Noam Elimelekh, that when you worship me, you will see the great reward that comes. You may not be able to see it right now, but that you'll see it down the road at least. And so that you should go into it with a sense of faith that when you worship me, that there's going to be something that's going to show you that the world is great, because that the world is full of goodness, because I am full of goodness. I created this world out of goodness, and I want you to experience that. I don't want you to worship me just for placating me, because I want to give you a sense of what is great in this world. So that may be God's frustration in this moment when the people of Israel would not listen to him. That if you worship me, you're going to see what's so great. And they're saying, we don't see it yet. And so out of this sense that out of that worship that this great reward is going to come, lachen naflu nitzotzot kedoshot b'sha'at habriya. So I translated here that here, sorry, thus the sparks of holiness fell at the time of creation. בכדי שאחר כך על ידי עבודתם שיעבדו לעלות הניצוצות יזכו לטובות הרבה. That in order that by way of their service to lift up the sparks, they will merit great goodness. This idea is taking the sense that this idea is taking the notion of the of Hasidut, of Jewish mysticism, that when God created the world, there were all of these sparks of holiness that were a part of that moment of creation. And when those sparks came into this world, that they were little basically bits and pieces of God that were surrounded by what's called the kelim, or the shards, which encompass the sparks. So you couldn't actually see the sparks, but that they were embedded in every object in this world. So for instance, if you take this button, this easy button from Staples, and this button, which is an object in this world, is a material object, has within it a certain degree of holiness, a certain degree of kedusha. And that kind of kedusha is embedded within it. And so when you use it, then you can experience that aspect of holiness. So I'll give one example. When I press this button, I get that feeling that whatever I accomplished, even if it was extremely difficult, was actually a little bit easy. And my sense of stress is relieved in that brief moment of pressing that button. And that moment came from being able to press the button, which means that the holiness that I experienced in that moment is that relief from stress, which connected me with a greater sense of connecting with who I really want to be, because I now have this burden that is lifted off of me, all because this little object gave me the opportunity to do so. Likewise, anything that we contact in this world, whether it be a positive or a negative thing, whether it be a book, a person, an aspect of nature, can lead us to find a greater sense of connection with God, can lead us to find a greater sense as to who we are and where we want to go in this world, if we allow those sparks to simply emanate, to simply come out of that object. Okay, so this idea, which is spoken about in our mystical text, according to Noam Elimelekh, from this point of view, is seen to be a very good thing, because the world is surrounded by all of these shards for us to be able to unlock, to uncover, to break open, and then we're going to see that goodness that comes out of it, see that holiness that comes out of it. And that at doing that is a very positive thing, is a wonderful thing to be able to do that. So, as he continues on, so that I would say is one aspect of what it means to be able to break open these shards and find the holiness within them. That uncovering these sparks is something that God wants us to do, that is a beautiful part of the original act of creation. But there's another aspect of breaking these shards which is a little bit tougher. Ve'achar chet Adam harishon, and after the sin of the first man, of Adam, Hosif lipol od nitzotzot hakedushot ayedei hachet. That when the first person, when Adam in the Garden of Eden committed his sin, that there were more sparks that came from heaven down to the world. Velazeh tzarich Adam la'avod lo yitbarach b'shnei madregot. And because of this, because of these additional sparks, it leads us to see that there's actually two ways in which one should worship God in order to be able to open up these sparks. Hem ahava ve'yirah. One path is the one of love, and one is the other path of what we could consider to be fear or respect. And we're going to get into that in a moment, but I just kind of want to lay out what this idea is like. You have here the moment of God's creation in which these sparks are drawn down. It's a part of the natural view of creation. If God is good and if all creation is good, then this aspect of uncovering the shards that are there, almost like when almost as if you're on a great mission of hide and seek, and you're searching the world for all of these shards, that it's something that we enjoy doing. It's something that we love to do, to be able to find meaning in every little thing that is in this world, in all of God's creations, that there is a part of us that yearns for that and that enjoys finding meaning in that. But then when Adam sins and falls, and God then says there's going to be this other aspect of all of these things in this world that are going to come down, and that you're going to have to find what those sparks are. But those sparks, when you go through that process of trying to discover it, it's not going to be pleasant. When you have a death of a loved one and you want to find meaning in that, that's not a pleasant experience. When you go through pain and suffering, when you're in the hospital, those are painful experiences that you wish you didn't have to go through it. This phrase that there's a silver line, that for every cloud there's a silver lining, is the idea that there is meaning in all the bad things. But the fact is, I'd rather not do with the cloud. I'd rather not have the cloud. I don't want to go through some event and say the reason why this bad thing happened is so I can discover the purpose of it. No, that doesn't seem to be the way that we're operating. We want that first aspect of discovering meaning from all the different aspects of the world that we love experiencing. We don't want to go through those bad times, those bad moments. And this is why I titled this class, Why Life is Hard. That it is because of this second aspect of trying to discover the sparks that we go through these events which are painful. Partially, and this is where the Noam Elimelek's philosophy comes forward, perspective comes forward, that we go through this because of our own faults. Because as human beings who live with the ability to make our own choices, to go through life and to make decisions based off our own free will, that obviously there are going to be opportunities, there are going to be moments in which those things that we choose to do will lead us down a wrong path. What I would also say there is that not just that the things that we choose to do lead us down the wrong path, but all the happenstance of the universe, that all the happenstance that happens, that occurs around us, that leads to bad things happening to us, whether it be an accident, whether it be things that are totally out of our control, are also born into the sense that as human beings, we created a society in which bad things are allowed to happen because of how we set them up. So that when a drunk driver comes, yes, we are not in control of that. We're just driving along normally, but that other person made a choice, and that choice has led to this awful thing. And so we come into these moments in which we're forced to discover what the meaning is out of those hard moments in life, knowing that we wish we didn't have to go through them at all. As Noam Elimelekh says, Yir'ahu lir'ot ulhistakel tamid b'shiflut ha'amazeh. That fear means always being aware of the humiliation, the despicability of this world. Meaning that the shiflut is sort of the baseness of this world. That not only because God created this world for us to discover the shards, but because God creates with a sense of free will, that there's a lot of elements in society which are dark, which are unpleasant, which are painful. And that having to go through that is a part of the human experience. And we can discover the goodness that comes out of it, but that we must approach it with a sense of knowing that the world is full of that, what we could call evil, which we could call horror, and that we must be open to seeing where we can find the sparks within it. Ve'al yedei zeh hu mishaber koach hakelim shel hanitzotzot. And by way of this, God, by way of this knowledge, one is able to break the strength of the shards holding the sparks, vayuchal lavo lidei romamot el, and to bring oneself to an exaltation of God. That this is a great love, and by way of this, the holy sparks are raised higher and higher. What I think this is really saying here is that word koach, that idea of the strength of the shards, that it takes a lot of energy to break that strength, to discover that goodness within all of these evil shards, these evil things that surround all the goodness in the world, is that when God had to go through that with Israel, that it was painful for God, that God wanted to unleash this anger. But the only way to break the shard that was Israel's recalcitrance against what God was offering for them, to follow God upon this path that they haven't seen beforehand. And we have our eyes which only see a few feet in front of us, and we can't see the future. We can't know that it's going to be okay. And so we wonder whether or not things are going to be okay. And then we go and spy on the land and see that there are all these giants there, and we can think of nothing but the fear of what's going to happen, and we don't know if God's going to be there. And that part of life is so painful for God to experience, because God's like, I created you, trust me. And it would be easy to say, let me just destroy this world that I've created. Let me destroy these people, and to try to start afresh with people who will be able to just go into the world and see the beauty of the world and just accept it for what it is. But no, it's not like that. We can't just simply accept the world as it is around us. And we go through life and not just saying that everything in this world is all good and wonderful. We can't do that. And it seems in many ways that life is built in that way. Life is both of the discovering the goodness, really enjoying the discovery of goodness, and sometimes really being pained in trying to discover that sense of goodness. And what God needed to learn in that moment, what Moses was reinforcing for him, is that it takes koach, it takes real strength to break those kelim, to break those shards that are built out of a sense of fear of this world. And that in breaking those shards, that it requires a little sense of gentleness, a sense of mercy, a sense of patience. And that if we are able to be open to the pain that comes with some of the experiences of our lives, that we will eventually be able to discover that there is goodness to discover within them. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this week's class. Take care and have a wonderful day. Shabbat Shalom.